That's ridiculous to say I give somebody a leash. Free speech, brother. People can say whatever they want and they can believe whatever they want. And I think it's unconstitutional, first of all. I don't think you can legally do that. He's black.
50 N-bombs.
Okay, he's black. Who gives?
Do you have any idea how one comment can spark a lot of controversies on the internet? UFC President Dana White responded to this by making a remark which made a woke journalist faint.
Supportive gay and lesbian community in this city. I did want to ask you about something you wrote a couple of years ago. You said if I had a gay son, I would think I'd...
Oh, look, another, I'm saying in the swamp, you guys, a swamp.
You become a champion, you become a star, and some would say...
Let me ask you something. Are you...
Having every word minorities and their representatives analyze, White was as uncompromising as could be, provoking a debate regarding such issues as free speech or how much political correctness is a reality nowadays. They're trying to oust me, and that is why his comment offended me so much. And what does this reaction tell us about journalism and freedom of speech currently? The steroid claims may be over the top, but one thing is for sure. Dana White has never been one to pull punches. Recently, he felt trapped by a woke journalist who attempted to grilling him on the subjects of homophobia, transphobia, and the perceived duties of the UFC to police its fighters. This time, the journalist wanted to create a PR fiasco for White, who overestimated his adversary's commitment to free speech, an idea as dear to him as the fight in the octagon is to a fighter. It is for this reason that White has been proficient at reaching the ultimate pinnacles of UFC as a station. He never gave up on the vision. When he and his partners purchased the UFC in 2001, it was considered one of the most negligible rings with no credence. There was no way that state athletic commissions would authorize an event and arenas refused to stage such an event. However, Dana, with zeal for mixed martial arts, made UFC reach the height of $1 billion company. He was never one to shy away from hard work and sweat, and it's the same characteristic that applies to his career at the UFC today. Some of the questions posed to White by the journalist during a recent conference were gained at eliciting a negative response from the latter, stating that by allowing fighter air their opinions, White was in effect encouraging aggressive sentiment. But Dana White, as expected, did not waver again. He stated that UFC is not here to regulate talk here and talk there. This means that people are free to talk without being prohibited by UFC. I don't let anyone have a leash, he went on writing, explaining that fighters are allowed to have whatever opinion they want and people have no right to object. White's commitment to free speech in particular is not just for the cameras, it forms part of his leadership that has characterized his tenure at the UFC. He has been receiving pressure over the years to suspend or fine fighters for posturing and making crude comments, including Conor McGregor and most recently, Colby Covington. Each time, White has declined to muzzle his athletes, saying that if he attempted to do so, it would be futile and a gross violation of people's natural rights. This time was no different, and it gave a good insight in what to expect for the next few months. In fact, the journalist asked him to comment on recent remarks made by UFC fighter Sean Strickland, who recently angered many people with provocative opinions regarding gender and trans subjects. White didn't flinch. He dismissed the idea that UFC must begin sanctioning fighters for their words. Well, that was crazy and unconstitutional. The Washington Post went on to explain with much iteration with this absurdity, and still does wherever it is that fighters physically pummel each other in the cage, and yet when they open their mouth to speak, all they get is a penalty. Thus, for commentators like Matt Safransky, the fact that these athletes willingly step into a cage where they proceed to punch each other in the face forms the basis for what prevents them from being permitted to even verbally ill-treat one another. White is keen on defending his fighters' right to free speech, but it is his stern rejection for what he deems as political correctness, cancel culture. While in today's culture, the so-called virtue signaling dictates that any offense, no matter how petty, is enough to get someone canceled, White is unyielding. He said for anyone to try and quell the people's ability to voice out their opinions, even if they are going to offend some people, is a wrong direction to tread on. The journalist, who seemed to be irritated by the unyielding position of White, proceeded further out, saying that probably the Nevada Athletic Commission might want to strip fighters for these remarks. White's response was sharp and definitive. He again stated that people have freedom of speech, especially fighters, and that it is foolish, unconstitutional, to try and contain the things that fighters have to say. UFC President Dana White has not backed down on his free speech rights, despite pressure to withdraw his support to this cause. When such American freedoms as free speech are reduced to taboos of political correctness, it is nice to see their champion in the pure form. His message is clear. If there is one thing you can rest assured is that fighters in the UFC are able to express themselves, and no force in the universe can intimidate the woke mob into completely silencing them. In the era where the public finds itself divided and targeted by social media vigilante-style packs, reducing the severity of what anyone who dared to question the narrative of the crowd may face, Dana White stands as a beacon of how more people should conduct themselves dealing with controversies of today's society. His unwillingness to allow the PC police to stamp on him and force his fighters into compliance is not simply about standing up for his fighters. It is about fighting for free speech and the right to free speech everywhere. Like him, another fighter from the UFC, Colby Covington, also does not shy away from saying politically incorrect things. Covington has endorsed Donald Trump, insulted liberals, and made other statements about other fighters. Each time, people would request White to control Covington, but White stuck to his motto that fighters should not be silenced.
Give a long leash to your fighters about, what they can say when they are up there with a UFC microphone and you are getting into territory of homophobia, transphobia. Like, is there...
I don't give anybody a leash.
Well, I'm saying you...
We do not silence anyone here, he stressed once again, and professed his desire to keep fighters honest. More recently, controversy was caused by Sean Strickland's crude language about gender and trans concerns. The response was immediate, with a lot of people waiting for White to do something. As we have seen on so many occasions before the event, White decided to toe the line with the fighters and said that although he may not necessarily share the same views as the fighters, he would always stand up for their right to express them.
No, are you? Let me know. Are you gay?
Could I get an answer?
Well, no, I'm asking. This is a part of. Are you a gay man?
I'm an ally of the community.
Okay. If you had a son, then he was like, you had a son, he was gay. You'd be like, oh man, you don't want a grandkid?
No problem.
There is freedom of speech and of the press, and anyone can think whatever they want, White reacted. For Dana, UFC is something that is vice and true, where one can frankly say what he wants to express. He has also indefiantly dismissed any calls from the woke culture, asking them to remove fighters or cancel the sport due to remarks made by them. He feels that free speech is one of the American values that can in no way be compromised, even in the face of controversy, as the First Amendment suggests. Unlike in other leagues, those fighting MMA, fans demanding censorship and threatening to boycott, or calling Dana White millions of times an ass, have never stopped him from supporting free speech. He said that fighters, like every other person, has the freedom of speech, despite the fact that some of the comments that they make might offend the ears of many people. This has earned him the praise and condemnation championing freedom of speech that people accord him, but Dana is not relenting. His philosophy is simple. In a sport where competitors perform an intense physical fight, leaving so much at stake, then they should be allowed to also speak their mind without someone else to gag them. Dana's approach has resonated with many fans who appreciate his defense of free speech in an increasingly censorious climate. Social media often lights up with support whenever White takes a stand against the so-called woke mob. While some media outlets criticize him for not reining in his fighters, others see his stance as a bold defense of free speech. Regardless of the backlash, Dana White continues to uphold the principle that the UFC is a place for unfiltered, raw expression, and he's not about to let political correctness dilute that. What are your thoughts on Dana White's stance? Let us know in the comments below.